The morning sun shone brightly over the sprawling city of Chicago. It was one of those days that started with a clear sky and the promise of something more. On the corner of 58th Street, the rush of traffic echoed through the tall buildings while street vendors set up shop and early morning commuters clutched their coffee cups like lifelines. In the heart of it all stood Madison Grant, a wealthy socialite known more for her fashion sense than her compassion. Madison was impeccably dressed in a custom-tailored cream-colored trench coat, matching high heels, and a designer handbag that cost more than most people's monthly rent. She sipped on her half-calf almond milk latte while her chauffeur opened the door to her luxury car. Her eyes scanned the street, unimpressed by the bustle of ordinary life. Just across the street, with her hands red from scrubbing floors, stood Ava Collins, 19 years old, with bright eyes and a warm smile that hadn't been dimmed by hardship. Ava worked as a part-time cleaner at a downtown office and took every job she could get to support her mother and little brother back home. Today, she had just finished mopping the front lobby of a cafe and was carrying her supplies back to the service alley when the unthinkable happened. Ava paused near the crosswalk, checking for traffic. A few cars zipped by and then came a sleek black SUV speeding through the turn. Madison, impatient and irritated by the delay in her morning commute, urged her driver to keep going despite the wet patch of road from a recently burst water pipe. The tires hit the puddle hard, sending a giant splash of grimy mud across the sidewalk, right onto Ava. The girl gasped, stumbling back as the filthy water drenched her uniform. Her mop and bucket clattered to the ground. People nearby turned to look, some gasping, others whispering. Madison looked back through the tinted window, sneered slightly, and said without remorse, "Shouldn't have been in the way." Then, the car pulled off without a care in the world. But what Madison didn't realize was that someone else was watching the entire scene from just a few feet away. An elderly man in a wheelchair parked by the bus stop had seen everything unfold. He narrowed his eyes as the SUV disappeared around the corner. That wasn't just anyone in the wheelchair. That was Mr. Ellington Dean, billionaire, philanthropist, and owner of one of the largest real estate firms in the Midwest. He was a man who had made his fortune from the ground up and never forgot what it felt like to be ignored and dismissed. Mr. Dean didn't say a word, but he kept his eyes on Ava. He saw the way she knelt down to gather her supplies, trying not to cry. She wiped her cheeks with her sleeve and took a deep breath before standing up and continuing on her way like nothing had happened. There was strength in that girl, the kind of strength money couldn't buy. Later that afternoon, Madison arrived at the downtown fashion showroom where she was set to host a charity gala preview. Photographers lined the entrance. Flashbulbs popped as she stepped out, pristine again, the morning incident forgotten like a bad dream. Inside, champagne flowed and laughter echoed through the marble hall. Madison basked in attention, unaware that her actions earlier that day had set something in motion she couldn't control. Meanwhile, Ava returned to her small apartment on Sudornat, the south side. Her mother greeted her at the door, worry in her eyes as she saw her daughter's stained uniform. Ava smiled weakly and said she just had a rough day. She didn't mention the mud. She didn't complain. She never did. The next morning, Ava returned to her job at the same office building. She scrubbed the floors, cleaned the windows, and made coffee runs without complaint. She didn't know that Mr. Dean had asked his assistant to find out everything about the girl who got splashed. Her name, where she worked, her background, everything. And when he found out that Ava lived in subsidized housing and worked 3 jobs while attending night school, he felt a rare stirring of admiration. By the end of the week, a letter arrived at Ava's door. It was thick, on heavy cream paper, with elegant lettering. She opened it slowly, not used to receiving anything that wasn't a bill or an overdue notice. The letter was an invitation to an exclusive event, a scholarship dinner hosted by the Dean Foundation. Her name was on the guest list. Confused, Ava showed the invitation to her mother, who urged her to go. She borrowed a dress from a neighbor and took a long bus ride across town. When she arrived at the ballroom, she felt completely out of place. Glittering chandeliers, gold-trimmed tablecloths, and people in $1,000 suits surrounded her. Still, she stood tall, her mother's words echoing in her heart. You are just as worthy as anyone else." Then came the surprise of the night. Mr. Dean took the stage and began speaking about humility, about remembering where we come from. His speech was powerful, but short. And then he did something no one expected. He told the story of a girl who had been splashed with mud by a wealthy woman and walked away with grace instead of anger. He said that girl reminded him of his younger self. The crowd went silent. Ava lowered her eyes, realizing who he was talking about. Then he smiled and called her name. Her heart stopped. She looked around, unsure if she'd heard right, but all eyes were now on her. Ava slowly made her way to the stage, unsure what was happening. Mr. Dean shook her hand and said, "This young woman will receive a full scholarship from the Dean Foundation. Not because she asked, not because she complained, but because she showed dignity when no one was watching, and strength when someone was." The applause that followed was thunderous. Ava could barely believe it. Tears streamed down her face as Mr. Dean leaned over and whispered, "They saw mud, I saw gold." Applause faded into warm chatter as Ava stepped off the stage, her cheeks wet and her heart pounding. She found her mother in the audience, her eyes shining with pride. They embraced, and for one perfect moment, the world felt right. Then, Mr. Dean approached, still smiling, and placed a hand on Ava's shoulder. "Meet me in my office tomorrow afternoon," he said quietly. "We'll talk about how to use this scholarship and get you started." Ava nodded, still overwhelmed. She barely slept that night, her mind racing with possibilities. University classes, meeting new people, finally building a future beyond cleaning floors. The next morning she returned to her janitorial job, but everything felt different. Her uniform felt lighter somehow. She held her head high as she swept the lobby floor, her colleagues congratulating her on the invitation. The office manager even offered her a day off to attend meetings with the foundation. Ava shook her head politely and said she would come, in later after those meetings, determined to balance work and opportunity. Her first meeting with Mr. Dean took place in his skyscraper office. The view from the 42nd floor spanned the skyline, Lake Michigan glinting in the distance. The walls were lined with art and photographs showing Mr. Dean at various stages of his life, charity events, groundbreaking ceremonies, and candid moments of him as a young entrepreneur. But Ava's eyes were drawn to a black and white photograph of a teenage boy sweeping floors in a factory, his expression determined. "That's me," Mr. Dean said when he noticed her interest. "I started working when I was your age, and it taught me more than any school could at that time." Ava listened intently as he outlined the scholarship program. It covered full tuition, books, living expenses, even a small stipend for emergencies. No strings attached except her commitment to maintain a GPA of 3.0 or above and volunteer at least 10 hours a month at the Dean Foundation's community outreach programs. He also mentioned an internship opportunity at one of his companies overseeing corporate social responsibility projects. "You'll learn about business, leadership, and giving back," he said. Tears pooled in Ava's eyes again. She wasn't sure what to say. She could barely afford the bus fare to campus, let alone tuition, and here was a man essentially handing her a ticket to a new life. But before she could respond, his assistant knocked and handed him a folder. He looked at her apologetically. "I have to attend a board meeting," he said, "but this is your folder. It has all the details, key dates, and contact information. I'll see you at orientation next week." Back at home, Ava spread the documents across the tiny kitchen table. Her mother hovered beside her, excited yet anxious. "This could change everything," her mother said softly, eyes glistening. Their apartment was small, 2 bedrooms, 1 bath, a narrow living room that doubled as a dining space. It was modest, but filled with love. Her brother Kyle, aged 12, bounded home from school and tossed his backpack onto the floor. He stared at the papers. "Are you going to college?" he asked, voice brimming with disbelief. "Yes, baby," Ava said, ruffling his hair. "I start in 2 weeks." Kyle grinned and jumped up, pulling her into a hug. Their mother wept silently, overwhelmed that her daughter, who had scrubbed floors and washed dishes for as long as she could remember, might finally have a future that extended beyond their cramped apartment. That weekend, Ava bought new clothes for orientation. Second-hand, affordable, but fresh and neat. She took the bus across town, clutching her acceptance letter like a lifeline. She arrived early at the university campus, a sprawling collection of brick buildings, green lawns, and students rushing between classes. She found the financial aid office and completed paperwork, her signature trembling as she pledged to uphold the foundation's expectations. Then she attended an orientation session where she received her student ID, course schedule, and a tour of the library. On the way out, she ran into a fellow freshman named Lily. Lily was from a well-off family in Evanston and had just finished high school on the honors list. She was polite but reserved. She and Ava struck up a conversation in line for coffee. Lily asked about Ava's major. "I want to study sociology," Ava replied, "to understand how social structures affect people like me." Lily nodded respectfully. "I'm majoring in business, but I'm thinking about minoring in nonprofit management. Maybe we'll take some classes together." Ava smiled, feeling a spark of friendship for the first time in a while. Meanwhile, Madison Grant's life continued unabated, till news of Mr. Dean's scholarship announcement began circulating among Chicago's social circles. Word spread that the scholarship recipient was the girl splashed with mud by a socialite, and people began to connect the dots. Madison noticed the gossip on social media and overheard a few baristas making snide remarks when she ordered her favorite pink-hued latte. "That's the same woman who caused a stir last week," one said. Madison glared but said nothing. At the fashion showroom that afternoon, she sipped a sparkling water and tried to grin for the photographers. Someone asked if she had any comment on Mr. Dean's charitable act. She forced a polite smile and said, "I'm thrilled that Foundation helps young people achieve their dreams. Congratulations to the recipient." Inside, though, she seethed. She'd been embarrassed and humiliated by this dirty little working girl, making headlines because of her own reckless actions. That evening, she scrolled through her social media accounts and saw hundreds of posts, some praising Mr. Dean's philanthropy, some mocking her. One influencer even wrote a blog post titled, "When Privilege Meets Arrogance, a Cautionary Tale." She tried to brush it off, but the comments hurt more than she'd expected. She realized with a sudden pang that her status, her money, her perfect outfits, it all meant nothing if a single moment could be used to define her so brutally. She pushed her phone away, angry, and ordered her assistant to delete any posts about her. But it was too late. Screenshots already were circulating. The next morning, Madison arrived at her office downtown. She was vice president of media relations for Devereaux Family Holdings, a large holding company with investments in real estate, hospitality, and technology. Her father, Charles Grant, had hired her a year ago to improve the family image after a scandal involving his last business venture. She'd thought the job would be easy. She had charm, good looks, and a Rolodex of contacts. But now she realized how fragile reputation could be and how quickly people could turn on you. She called an all-staff meeting. Her team entered the conference room, each with a laptop and a wary expression. Madison cleared her throat. "I'm sure many of you have seen the story about Mr. Dean's scholarship," she began evenly. "It's a wonderful gesture, but the backlash I've received, those comments and memes, are unacceptable. This is a teachable moment about empathy and accountability. I will be meeting with a PR consultant to address these perceptions. I expect everyone to continue their work professionally." Her words sounded hollow even to her own ears. She glanced around the room. A few colleagues avoided eye contact. One dared to sneer. Madison realized that her power felt meaningless. She had status, but no real respect. At home that night, she scrolled through her closet of designer gowns, high heels, and expensive accessories. She tried on a black cocktail dress, twirled in front of the mirror, but saw only a reflection of arrogance. She recalled the look on Ava's face when the mud drenched her. Shock, hurt, and then calm acceptance. It haunted Madison. For the first time, she wondered what it would be like to walk in Ava's shoes, to face life without privilege. Across town, Ava started her classes in earnest. Her first sociology lecture was about social stratification and the cycles of poverty. She sat in the ancient lecture hall, scribbling notes furiously. She felt like she stood out. Most students around her had new laptops, sleek backpacks, and jeans that looked brand new. Her backpack was patched and her shoes were scuffed, but she persevered. After class, she headed to her part-time job at the student center, cleaning restrooms and wiping down desks. Then she studied until late, her textbooks spread out on the library table, while students with grants or family money chatted with friends or browsed social media. One evening, as she mopped the hallway outside the student union, she overheard two fraternity boys making a vicious joke about the scholarship mud girl. She gritted her teeth, forgetting her usual poise. When they turned to leave, she locked eyes with them and said quietly, "My life isn't a joke. Show some respect." They looked surprised and one muttered an apology. Ava continued mopping, her heart racing. Her pride sometimes got the better of her, but she was determined not to be a victim. One Friday afternoon, Mr. Dean invited Ava to attend a board meeting of the Dean Foundation. She wore her best blouse and slacks, pacing nervously before the meeting. When she arrived, he introduced her to the board members, lawyers, business executives, educators, each nodding politely as she took a seat. The first item on the agenda was to review the progress of scholarship recipients. When her name came up, board members spoke highly of her academic performance, volunteer work at a local women's shelter, and mentorship of younger students. By the time the meeting ended, people approached her with questions. How do you balance work and school? What inspires you to give back? She answered honestly and respectfully.